Okay. Good evening, Dr. B. I'm Amy Scammerhorn,
This is Eric Shaver. How you doing?
and we're here to do our reflection. And first of all, we want to go over the questions that we had raised for this particular class in our first section. And one of my first questions was, what are some of the reasons behind why some parents don't make more of an effort to become more involved in their children's education?
Again, some of the things with that, it could be money, it could be jobs, it could be single parent households, and then while I know you and I are really lucky with our parents, some just may not care.
Yeah.
And that's a really terrible thing.
It's really unfortunate.
Yeah.
And here's another question that I had is, what are some of the reasons behind why some parents don't make more of an effort to become more involved in their children's education? And we did touch on that, but can you think of any other reasons behind that?
Yeah, well, actually, when I was in Chicago doing an urban ed thing, I tried to get all the parents together when I was teaching for 2 weeks, and I had responses from I can't afford bus fare to I have to keep my job.
Yeah, I've actually heard that, and it's funny you say that because this week, this Thursday actually, we're having parent-teacher conferences, and in 3 hours, I'm lucky to see 20 parents.
Yeah.
So, and most of my parents work at hourly jobs, and they just simply can't afford to take the time off during the day to come in, and I think that's just really sad.
Scaffolding off that for parent-teacher conferences, Wayne does something a little different. We actually have 2 block nights. 6 hours a pop, our parents can come in. And again, that's hit and miss too, even though we have a giant extended block.
And we had that too at Pike for a while, but we found that we get just as many in the 3 hours as we do in the 6.
Wow,
So it's pretty sad.
What else? What other questions you got?
Okay, let's see. Actually, scaffolding off of that some more, if some of the parents are physically unable to come to school to involve themselves in their children's classrooms, how do we get them to actually come in, and maybe in the home, how do we get them involved?
Twitter, Facebook. But then you got the issues of, do they have access to the internet?
That's a big constriction in my schools too. The parents just simply can't afford to have the technology.
I mean, the thing is too, it's hit and miss when I do letters. When I send a letter home with a kid, I'm playing roulette. I don't know if they're ever going to see it either.
Well, that's the nature of high school too,
Yeah.
which is what we teach. They don't ever want to bring that stuff in, or home, or that comes up like 3 weeks later, and they're like, "Oh yeah, was I supposed to turn this in?" Get that all the time.
Speaking of that though, like you already talked a couple questions about, how do we reach these families? I had a question that's kind of similar to yours. It was, how do we do this for minority families in particular? Specifically, Latinos or the undocumented immigrants. I know one of the readings I had, I think I talked about in the forum, was Latino families were afraid to come to school because there was a seatbelt checkpoint. And they were terrified that if they got stopped, they were going to get deported. So you have this giant distrust in the system.
Absolutely.
So how can we go about doing that, especially if they don't know English? And like, you're lucky, you do speak Spanish, and I speak broken Spanglish at best. But I can't be as fluent to some people. I can say, hey, you need to come work, but then I can't respond back and forth when they come back with me that fast.
Right.
So, like, what do you do to reach some of your minority parents?
Well, like you said, luckily I do have the resources. I can communicate in Spanish, and I can get in touch with them and create letters and things like that. But the biggest resource that I use is our E&L department, and they are just absolutely wonderful. They are well connected with El Puente and La Plaza, which are 2 organizations in the city that really help out with the Hispanic community. And they kind of give the under-the-table resources to the kids through those organizations.
So, like, some, like, the additional medical care and, like, some funding for college?
Yes, and in fact, they give a whole CD of scholarship information
That's awesome.
out to the high school students, and there are scholarships available for both documented and undocumented students. And one of my former students, I had no idea he was undocumented. He's like, yeah, because I came here when I was 2.5, and he's like, well, I have to pay out-of-state tuition for even IUPUI, and he's like, I can't afford it. So I told him, he'd never been in an E&L class in his life. So I told him, I'm like, hey, you need to go see the E&L teacher because she's got this CD just full of scholarships, even for undocumented. I mean, this kid's as smart as a whip, too. I mean, straight A student. This is a kid who deserves to be in college because he is going to make a difference someday. But, his hands are tied because of something that his parents did when he was younger. he's suffering the consequences for it.
Well, this would be cool. Today, the legislature actually passed a bill out
I
of
saw
subcommittee.
that.
You
I
see
saw
that?
that, yeah.
Where they may actually take away some of the limits on undocumented immigrants not having to pay out state tuition. So we're going to see where that goes with this legislative session.
Yeah, I think that's pretty awesome, especially since I know so many of those E&L kids. A lot of our teachers kind of, it's sad, they kind of just discount them as, oh, they don't speak any English. But there are some really talented kids within the program. A lot of them are really great artists. They're really good with their hands. And some of them, they're just natural languages. I mean, I've got some kids who speak 2-3 languages who are Hispanic, and I think it's pretty awesome. So
that's alternative assessment. That's my thing, but that's an entirely different conversation.
it's a whole different ball game. So anyway, Eric, what kind of impact has the class had on you?
So far, to me, it's been really interesting. I've seen, and I've read a lot more literature than I would have.
Me too.
What pertaining to families in particular than I would have if I was just traditionally doing it. I mean, like some of the other questions I had raised was, the number of Latino families in Indiana, and I found a whole bunch of literature about Latino families.
Right.
Pre-K stuff, supportive stuff, before school, after school. So by leading the lit, this class has made me do, especially for the forums, I'm answering more questions that have been raised just, on my own volition. So it's really awesome.
Yeah, I really like that too. And one thing that the class has helped me realize is just exactly how vital it is to have parents who are involved and engaged in their children's education. And the themes that we've actually discussed in this class, in addition to our readings, they've shown me that in my school we have some degree of parental involvement, but we have very few parents who are actually engaged in their children's schooling. And as educators, we just need to let them know that we're willing to listen to them and work with them as partners and not bystanders, as one of our readings had said.
That's awesome. Another thing too, this class is it's made me more attuned to just the whole family dynamic. That again, I know that there are single parent households.
Yep.
I know that there are people that are kids with incarcerated. There are kids in the foster system.
Yep.
There are people living with their grandparents, stuff like that. But then, like one of the talks that you did, Dr. B, over just the different types of families, like step families and bi, lesbian, gay families, and how that stuff's going on. The fact that there's the emerging family dynamic and how that's changing and impacting schools has also really come to life for this class for me.
Yeah, I've really noticed that too. Actually, I don't know whether this class is just making me more aware of it, and I've always kind of seen it on the surface, but some of the things that we're doing with the readings and the videos and things like that, it's really bringing it more into a cohesive unit.
Is it just because the classes we've taken have been all tech and school related, and just looking at the school itself, we've never really looked individually at families, I think.
And I think it's because these two classes dealing with the family and urban education are coming at the end, where they're both kind of intertwined.
Yeah.
I think that's helping kind of bring it more to the surface too.
Yeah, it's a topic sandwich that we hadn't had
Yes.
before. Yeah.
And it's a rather large sandwich. So anyway, another thing that I've learned is that through my independent and the assigned readings is just how little training that we have on dealing with families.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm old. I've been teaching for quite some time, and I've never had any kind of training as to how to get parents to engage in their children's education. There are no classes on it. After I graduated, this really dates me, but we didn't have multicultural education classes. We just kind of touched on it in a chapter in a book someplace, but we never actually had to physically take a class when I was doing my undergrad and my pre-service teaching. So that's different.
So that kind of differs with me because my teachers, when I was doing my teacher ed, were all progressive into multicultural ed, into social justice. So I had to read everything from Dewey to Nagoya. I had read something else of his already. So I kind of got the multicultural thing. So when I plan assignments, I'm looking at a bunch of different stuff trying to empower. But again, I got that specifically in undergrad.
Yeah, and mine was kind of more baptism by fire. It's like, oh, here I am, my background of being from almost a completely opposite culture and community, and here I am in a multicultural setting. But luckily, my parents, we have a lot of relatives that live in Chicago, and we were exposed to urban areas as we were younger, and we actually did have the interaction that some of my classmates did not have, and my high school classmates, not my college classmates, but at least I had some sort of reference point, but it was a challenge at first, but now everything's going okay, and we all get along, and we just kind of celebrate and embrace our differences and similarities. So
That's awesome.
it's a good thing.
That's cool. I know another thing that I did was I was really thinking about I talked about, there's the different dynamic of families. I'm also really